The Miami Heat just landed the biggest name available on the entire trade market, and now they're paying the price for it in a completely different part of the roster. Norman Powell, one of the best offensive additions this franchise made in years, is on his way out the door, and the reason comes down entirely to the cost of adding a genuine superstar. I've gone through every piece of this story, every quote, every financial detail, every insider report, and I'm going to break it all down for you right now. So before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because this one covers a genuinely massive shift for this franchise. Let's start with the move that changed everything for this franchise. The Miami Heat pulled off one of the most significant trades of the entire NBA offseason, acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bobby Portis Jr. from the Milwaukee Bucks. It's the kind of trade that instantly transforms a franchise's outlook, giving Miami a genuine top-tier superstar to build around for the first time since the Jimmy Butler era began unraveling. Pairing Antetokounmpo with Bam Adebayo gives the Heat one of the most physically dominant frontcourts in the entire league on paper, two elite defenders and rebounders who can also both put the ball on the floor and create offense in their own right. For a team that finished last season 43 and 39 10th in the East and missed the playoffs for the first time since 2019, landing a player of Antetokounmpo's caliber represents an almost immediate leap back into legitimate contention. Even Fisher's early projections suggested Antetokounmpo could push this roster to something like 48 wins and a first-round playoff appearance right away, a dramatic turnaround from where the franchise sat just months earlier. But every blockbuster trade this significant comes with real costs elsewhere on the roster, and Miami's are becoming clear fast. The most immediate casualty is guard Norman Powell, who just completed his first season with the Heat after arriving via trade from the Clippers last summer. Powell's first year in Miami was genuinely outstanding. He averaged 21.8 points a game, earned his first career All-Star selection, and quickly established himself as one of the better scoring guards in the entire league at 31 years old, arriving via a trade that sent Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson to the Clippers the previous summer. It was widely viewed as one of the sharper value trades Miami had made in years, bringing in a proven scorer entering his prime for a fraction of what his production would have cost on the open market. Bam Adebayo himself couldn't stop praising him after the trade brought Powell to Miami, telling reporters at his own youth basketball clinic that Powell was a guy who'd floated under the radar for years before finally showing everyone he could be an all-star caliber player, adding that he was genuinely happy to have him as a teammate heading into that first season together. Now, just one season later, that same player looks almost certain to leave. According to ESPN insider Shams Charania, speaking on the Pat McAfee show, the Heat are operating under the direct assumption that Powell will not be on next season's roster. Charania was blunt about it, saying the organization is expecting him not to be there this offseason and that multiple other suitors are already showing real interest in his services. The math here is pretty straightforward once you understand the cap situation. Acquiring a supermax-level talent like Antetokounmpo requires an enormous amount of cap space and long-term financial commitment, and that reality has left Miami with dramatically less flexibility to retain and build out the rest of its roster around him and Adebayo. Charania added that keeping Powell would be extremely difficult financially, though he noted Miami could still explore some version of a sign and trade to at least recoup some value rather than simply letting him walk for nothing in return. It's the exact same tension every team faces after landing a superstar through trade rather than the draft, suddenly having to reconcile the roster that got you competitive in the first place with the much bigger financial commitment that new star demands. Powell's market has already started to take shape too. The Chicago Bulls have reportedly emerged as one of the suitors showing real interest, joining the Detroit Pistons, who'd already been linked to Powell earlier in the process, alongside fellow Heat free agent Tyler Herro's name floating around similar speculation. The fact that multiple contending or ascending teams are already circling underscores just how much value Powell built for himself during that single all-star caliber season in Miami, value the Heat front office clearly recognizes they likely won't be able to match given their new financial reality post-Antetokounmpo. Both the Bulls and Pistons represent exactly the kind of team that could use a proven scoring punch like Powell provides, either as a veteran mentor for a younger core or as a legitimate difference maker off the bench in a playoff push. And Powell might not be the only piece Miami ends up sacrificing to make this whole reshaped roster work. According to Jake Fisher of the Steinline, the Heat could also look to move forward Nikola Jovic in an effort to bring back more outside shooting, addressing a need that's becoming increasingly urgent now that the frontcourt is built around two non-shooting bigs in Antetokounmpo and Adebayo. It's a genuinely tricky puzzle for the front office to solve. You've just added one of the most dominant interior forces in the league, but pairing him with another traditional big man in Adebayo means the roster desperately needs shooting and spacing everywhere else on the floor to keep the offense from getting clogged up. Losing Powell, one of the best shot creators and scorers this roster had, only makes that spacing problem more urgent to solve through other means, even if it means trading away promising younger pieces like Jovic just to bring in more floor spacing specialists. Jovic himself had shown real flashes of a stretch four skill set over his young career, which makes the idea of moving him feel almost counterintuitive on the surface, trading away one of the few players already capable of shooting from the frontcourt in order to acquire more shooting elsewhere. It's worth stepping back and thinking about the bigger picture Miami is navigating here. This is genuinely uncharted territory for a Heat organization that spent years chasing star power without quite landing a top-tier talent in his prime. Getting Antetokounmpo represents a massive symbolic and competitive victory for this front office, but it also means fundamentally reshaping almost everything else about how this roster is built. The Heat can no longer just be a collection of hardworking role players and steady two-way guards surrounding a solid but unspectacular star duo. Now they have to build genuine shooting and secondary playmaking around a superstar whose game is defined by attacking downhill and dominating in the paint rather than spacing the floor, all while operating with significantly less financial flexibility than they had before the trade actually happened. This isn't the first time this front office has been connected to superstar rumors either. Names like Kevin Durant and Damian Lillard have surfaced in Miami trade speculation over the years, and Bam Adebayo himself has previously acknowledged being mentioned in those same conversations, always expressing hope that he'd get to spend his entire career with the organization that drafted him. Landing Antetokounmpo finally gives Miami the kind of star power those years of speculation were always chasing, but the roster cost of actually completing that pursuit is only now becoming fully clear. There's also a human element to all of this worth remembering. Powell spoke openly about how much he valued his first year in Miami, and Adebayo's own comments about him were about as genuine and complimentary as you'll hear one teammate give another, describing the addition as a very good shakeup that brought a completely different dynamic to the team's identity. Watching that kind of quickly built chemistry potentially dissolve after just a single season is a real cost, even if it's the financially logical outcome of adding a player like Antetokounmpo. It's worth remembering, too, that Powell was reportedly looking for an extension with the Clippers before that team traded him away specifically to keep its own books clear, meaning this will now be the second time in as many years that Powell finds himself pushed out of an organization for purely financial, rather than basketball, reasons. Roster building at the highest levels of the NBA often comes down to exactly this kind of trade-off, sacrificing proven, likable role players in service of chasing a bigger, more transformative talent. And Miami is now squarely in the middle of figuring out whether that trade-off pays off the way they're hoping. So here's where everything stands. The Heat pulled off a genuine blockbuster, acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bobby Portis Jr. from Milwaukee and instantly transforming their outlook after a disappointing playoff-less season. But that move has created real financial strain elsewhere on the roster, with Norman Powell, one of the best offensive pieces Miami added in years, now expected to leave in free agency, and even promising young forward Nikola Jovic potentially on the table in a trade for more shooting. Building a genuine contender around Antetokounmpo and Adebayo is going to require some real roster surgery over the coming months, and how well Miami navigates replacing what it's losing in Powell and potentially Jovic could determine whether this superstar trade actually translates into real playoff success rather than just a talented, imbalanced roster still searching for the right pieces to complement its two dominant, non-shooting big men. So tell me what you think. Was landing Giannis Antetokounmpo worth losing a player like Norman Powell just one season after acquiring him, or should the Heat have found a way to keep both? And do you think trading Nikola Jovic for shooting is the right move to fully build out this new look roster? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you catch every update as it happens. I'll be back soon with more Heat news.